Hi guys and welcome back. In this video we're quickly going to talk about two different types of wait. You've got explicit waits and implicit waits. We're going to be using these when JavaScript is taking longer to run than our code. And that would mean that our code would be faster than the JavaScript, and that can cause a series of issues. For example, if the JavaScript is responsible for changing an element on the page, and your code tries to access that element before the JavaScript runs, then you're going to have a problem because the element's not going to be there. That sort of stuff is the occasions when you want to use waits. An explicit wait, as you can see here, is very straightforward. You import the time module from Python. That's a built-in. You don't need to install it. And you do time.sleep, and that's going to sleep for 5 seconds. You can use this in Selenium. You can use it anywhere else in your Python code. And it can be quite helpful, but it's also a bit limited, because if the element appears after 1 second, then you've got 4 seconds of waste. And if the element appears after 10 seconds, then this is not enough. And sometimes JavaScript takes longer to run, other times it takes less time to run, so it's not ideal to do something like this. The other option for explicit waits is to do something like this. And I know the code looks a bit complicated, we've not seen it before, but don't worry too much. To do an explicit wait, you need to import 3 things. You need to import by, you need to import expected conditions, and WebDriver wait. Then what you do is you use WebDriver wait, and you give it the browser that you want to use and how long to wait up to. So this code here is going to wait up to 10 seconds unless the condition that we say happens. So when the condition happens, the wait ends. So this is essentially a wait until, but it can end early. The condition is expected conditions dot presence of element located. And this is a way of telling Selenium to wait until an element exists in the page. The element doesn't have to be visible, it just has to be there in the page. So these 2 lines of code are telling the browser to wait up to 10 seconds unless an element appears on the page. And the element that has to appear on the page is the final line here, line 7, which is this tuple. A tuple of selector type and selector. Up till now, we've been using CSS selectors as our selectors. But for the expected conditions module, you have to give it the selector type. So that means we give it a tuple that says by.css_selector and the locator. Here's how you can use the by class. Up till now, we've been using something like line 3. Tag underscore dropdown equal select hash tag. That means we want to access a select element in the HTML, and the ID of the element is tag. Then, when we run code like in line number 8, we do self.browser.findElement by CSS selector, and we pass in that string. However, you can do find element instead, only that you have to pass it what type of selector you want to use. So here we're going to do self.browser.findElement, and we pass in by.cssSelector, and then the string as the second argument. That means that we can then use other types of selectors if we want. So here's how you could do that if you wanted to organize your selectors in this way. Imagine you've got a selector like in line number 4 that says by ID, tag. Now this is how we define a tuple in Python. So just underscore ID is a tuple of 2 values, by.id and tag. And here's how you can use them. You can do something like line 11, self.browser.findElement by ID, and you can pass in the string directly. In that case, you would not need to define just ID as a tuple. You could just define it as the ID. You could do something like line number 12, which is self.browser.findElement, and then you pass by ID and the string. And finally, and this is actually my preferred way of doing things in Selenium, is to do something like line 13. You define your locators as in line 4, and then you do, like in line 13, self.browser.findElement, and you pass in the 2 values of the selector as arguments, and that's why we use the asterisk. This is essentially argument unpacking. So we say asterisk just underscore ID, and that passes by ID and tag as the 2 values, as the 2 arguments to the findElement method. And what that allows you to do is to very easily and very concisely define your selectors while also being explicit in what they are for. So you don't have to assume that they're all CSS selectors. You can just say by CSS selector and then the tag dropdown, or by ID and then the tag. In our project, we've not done this because I felt it added a little bit of complexity, but nonetheless, it is my preferred way when I'm working on a larger project. So other things you can use with the by class, you can do by ID, XPath, link text, so you can actually search for links. You can do partial link text, you can do name, tag name, class name, and CSS selector. So more information on all this is linked in the resources section of the lecture, so feel free to take a look at the official documentation that I've put in there if you want more information on this. Finally, we've got implicit weights. An implicit weight is defined at the very start of your Selenium code. So just after you create your Chrome driver or your browser, you can say driver.implicitly weight and then a number. And what this does is whenever you try to find an element and it's not there, the browser will wait up to 10 seconds in this case by checking continuously until the element appears. I do not recommend doing this, although it's much simpler. It's kind of obscure, and then when you're looking at your code, it's not clear that it's going to wait up to 10 seconds every time. And also, it can hide problems. If your code is always waiting 10 seconds for everything, it probably means something's wrong with your application, so usually you want to avoid implicit waits. However, they do exist, they are in the official documentation, you can use them, and you should probably know about them if you want to apply for a Selenium-based job. Thanks for joining me in this video. Let's jump into the code, so I'll see you in the next one.